What's up, everybody? Hello and welcome to Not Your Average Meta, an MTG Commander channel dedicated to bringing you decks and commanders you wouldn't normally find in your average meta. This week's video is brought to you by our new channel sponsor, International MTG. If you're looking for competitive pricing on your favorite MTG cards, old and new, be sure to check out the International MTG store and TCG Player, link in the description of this video. This week on Not Your Average Meta, we have Patrick back making another appearance, along with the rest of your favorite commander crew. First, we have Patrick playing his trusty Big Green Jellybean Omnath Locus of Mana. This deck looks to dump a lot of mana into his mana pool in order to make a giant Omnath while also pumping out big green creatures. Then we have Gavin returning with his tiny friend Tinybones Trinket Thief. This deck looks to make his opponents discard their hands in order to use Tinybones' card draw ability to create card advantage for himself. Next, we have Justin playing the Mimeoplasm for the first time this season. This deck looks to mill big creatures into his graveyard in order to eventually create a terrifying giant Mimeoplasm monster. Finally, we have Foggerl playing his beloved Zurgo Helmsmasher deck for the first time on the channel. This deck looks to cast Zurgo fast and smash his opponent's faces in with commander damage. Now that we have our fighters, let's step into the Thunderdome and see which deck will come out on top. Turn 1, Patrick draws and plays a forest return and then passes. Gavin draws and drops in a swamp before paying 1 for an early game Shrieking Affliction. Justin draws and plays a tapped Sunken Hollow and passes. Fog draws and pays the 2 life to play an untapped Blood Crypt. Patrick draws and plays another forest before paying 2 for a Sylvan Carotid. Gavin draws and plays a swamp, then pays 2 to cast his commander Tinybones. Justin draws return and plays an island before passing turn. Fog draws and plays an untapped Dragon Skull Summit before paying 2 for an Arcane Signet. Patrick plays another forest return, then pays 3 to cast his commander, the original mono green Omnath. Gavin draws return and plays his signature Mana Crypt before casting Vicious Rumor. The Sin has each opponent taking a damage, discarding a card, and milling the top card of their library while he gains a life. He then casts a Demonic Tutor, going to look for a card in his library. At his instep, Tinybone triggers and he loses a life and draws a card. Justin plays a Swamp return and then pays 3 to cast a Mystic Redaction before passing. Fog draws and plays a Battlefield Forge return before passing to Patrick. On his instep, Patrick taps his Carotid to put 1 green mana into his mana. Patrick draws return and plays another Forest. He then pays 2 to cast a Rampant Growth, going to put another Forest into play. On his upkeep, Gavin rolls for his Mana Crypt trigger, losing 3 life. He then draws and taps out to cast an Oppression. Justin scries on his upkeep, keeping the card on top of his library, then draws it for turn. He then plays a Forest and then casts Hilarion Winds. In response, Fog casts a Vampiric Tutor, or then a Red Elemental Blast to destroy the Mystic Redaction. He then discards a card to Oppression, looks for a card that he puts on top of his library, and then loses 2 life. On his instep, Tinybones triggers, and Gavin loses a life and draws a card. Fog draws and plays a Plateau for turn. He then casts a Vindicate to destroy the Oppression, discarding a card. On his instep, Patrick puts 3 more mana into his mana pool. Patrick draws and plays another Forest before tapping out to put 7 more mana into his mana pool. He then goes to combat, swinging his giant Omnath and Fog unprovoked for 11 commander damage. Then in his second main phase, Patrick uses 8 of his mana to cast a Stonehoof Chieftain. On his upkeep, Gavin draws and automatically gets disqualified for not rolling for his Mana Crypt trigger, before casting a Planar Void and then a Cabal Ritual. He then uses his remaining mana to cast a Mind Slice. Justin draws and plays a Lonar Oasis before passing turn. Fog draws and plays a tapped Valakut Stoneforge before paying to cast his commander Zurgo Helmsmasher. He then immediately goes to combat, swinging him at Gavin for 7 commander damage. Patrick draws return then taps out to put 7 more mana into his mana pool. He then uses 5 of it to cast Overwhelming Stampede before going to combat and aggressively swinging both his creatures at Gavin, who blocks with his Mind Slicer. The Mind Slicer then gets exiled and doesn't trigger, and Gavin takes 27 damage. Patrick then uses 3 of his mana to cast Yorvo, Lord of Garenbrig. Gavin remembers to roll for his Crypt trigger on his upkeep this time and manages to stay alive. He then casts Raven's Crime, targeting Patrick, making him discard a card, and then an Inquisition of Kozilek on Justin. He then looks at Justin's hand and has him discard a card. At his instep, Tinybone triggers and Gavin loses a life and draws a card. Justin draws return then casts Extract from Darkness, having each player mill their top card of their library, while he returns a Torrent Elemental back to play from his graveyard. Fog draws return and then goes directly to combat, swinging Zurgo at Justin for 7 commander damage and then passes. Patrick untaps return and draws. He then puts 7 mana into his mana pool and goes to combat. He then swings Omnath and his Chieftain at Justin and Yorvo at Gavin. In a final heroic showing, Gavin casts Deadly Rollick from his deathbed to exile the Chieftain. Gavin then dies and Justin takes his 10 commander damage. Patrick uses 5 mana to cast Nelia's Intervention for 3, going to find 3 lands, putting them to hand, before playing a Nykthos as his land for turn. Justin draws return and plays an island before casting Sagu Mauler and passing. Fog draws and casts a Faithless Looting, drawing 2 cards and discarding 2 cards. He doesn't find what he's looking for and decides to flashback Faithless Looting, drawing 2 more cards and discarding 2 more cards. and goes to combat swinging 7 commander damage at Patrick. Patrick draws for turn and plays a tapped Aura and Reef the Vastwood. He then pays to activate Nykthos for 5 green mana and then dumps all his mana into his mana pool. Patrick then goes to combat and swings Omnath at Justin, who double blocks, killing both his creatures. In his second main phase, Patrick pays to cast a Prowling Sepropod. Justin draws for turn and pays to cast his commander, the Mimeoplasm. Mimeo then enters as a copy of the Sagu Mauler with an additional 3+1/+1 counters from the Torn Elemental. Fog draws for turn and then activates Shizos, targeting Zurgo. Fog then swings Zurgo at Justin, and before damage is dealt, he casts Tumor Battle Rage, giving Zurgo double strike, taking Justin out of the game. In his second main phase, Fog knows he's dead to commander damage next turn and concedes the game to Patrick. Alright, we got Patrick, a newcomer to the channel, got his first win today, playing mono green. How's it feel?
It feels good. I'm happy. I'm happy Omnath got there today.
How did it feel narrowly escaping death that last time?
Yeah. Luck was definitely on my side. I was very, very relieved.
Nice. Good game.
Good game.
Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe so you can see more games and decks you wouldn't normally see in your average meta.